October 1964 felt like the kind of cold that sits on your bones and refuses to leave. And that evening in eastern Kentucky, the air had a quiet around it that set my teeth on edge before I even stepped off the truck. I was a young sergeant then, the man who counted paces and kept the small recon team from getting lost in the dark. And we were given a job under a story, so thin we laughed about it once the radios were off. We drove up a ridge above a place called Hell Gap. The valley below looked ordinary enough from a distance, a handful of roofs, a cut of creek winding through limestone, a scatter of smoke where somebody still had a fire going. But everything changed the moment the trees swallowed the road. There was a low, steady vibration that lived under the wind like a held breath, a noise you felt more than heard, and though I told myself it was power lines or a distant train, there were no lines and no tracks that should have made that sound. Someone had left a porch lamp burning on a house that was supposed to be empty, the light looking small and stubborn through the mist, like a person refusing to blink. Orders were simple: mark the places we'd later seal, move light, keep every scrap of gear on your body, and ask no questions. That last demand was what bothered me most in training and in the field. We usually buried or cached things when we needed to leave a place quiet. But being told to carry everything on us, to never leave a single piece behind, felt like someone wanted the landscape to forget we had ever been there. The briefing was handed to us by a major with no unit markings. A civilian followed, thin and quiet, with a plain case and no name. He said he would observe and take reports higher than battalion. Civilians didn't come with us unless something sensitive waited in the dark. We moved before dawn, through county lines, and past a National Guard armory, where locked crates were opened and strange supplies unloaded. Thick rolls of wire meant for long fencing, shape charges, far too many for soil testing, metal signs that read federal property, do not enter. The captain stared at those signs a beat too long. We loaded fast and climbed. The land got steeper, the truck narrower, and the air carried a cold sourness that felt part engine, part rotted leaf. The civilian sat beside me and wrote in a little book without looking up, and I had the odd certainty that he already knew the way. At the valley edge, a sheriff in tired clothes met us at a small church and said things with rehearsed politeness. Most families had accepted relocation. A few had stayed. Hell Gap was cleared. When the captain probed, the sheriff said he would not go back into the valley, not even with armed escort. Inside the church basement, we spread out the maps. The valley's mouth was narrow, the road a tight bend between ridges. The sheriff said the old mine had been a problem for years, but would not say what sort of problem. Nobody wanted to say certain words out loud. We walked the last mile on foot, the soil slick with leaves, packs heavy, boots sinking at times deeper than they should. The gatehouse at the top of the road had fresh boards over the windows, and the smell of cut pine mixed with something sweet and sharp, a metallic tang like a radiator on a hot day left too long in the sun. We moved in as light fell. A house near the road had its door unlocked. Plates on the table, a pot cooling on the stove, a radio with its cord pulled out and left beside it. No footprints leading away. No sign of people. The captain marked the place as unconfirmed, and we pushed on. As we went, maps and my pace count refused to agree. Bends in the creek that should have been gentle were tight and jagged. Distances on paper were shorter than what my feet recorded. The engineer swore the prints came from the Springs map, and the print's date matched the folder the major handed over. Yet the land moved like it had a mind of its own. When night came, we hid in a saddle above the town that once served the mine, boarded storefronts, a leaning tipple, a rail spur eaten by rust. The valley lay below, like something folded shut. And under the quiet, there was that thin hum present and patient, like someone humming a tone they hadn't finished. I wrote distances by moonlight, and each number felt like a small act of defiance against the thing that refused to be measured. Fog came off the creek in the morning, and the valley's edges blurred like a painting half-washed. The civilian kept opening his case, and checking the inside as if some mechanism might drift out of place. We followed narrow trails that looked flat, but played tricks on the feet. Some steps sank soft, as if stepping through a crust into something looser beneath. Others landed solid. We found small signs of people, a camp with quilts hung to dry, canned food stacked neat, a kettle cooling on coals, used recently, but no sign of panic, only of people who had stepped away briefly and left some things with care. A wire and bun bundle hung from a tree, facing the valley, a thing of rusted nails and old wire, like someone had built a warning or a map in 3 dimensions. Chalk marks appeared on door frames and kitchen walls, rough circles with lines spreading outward, like a crude diagram of the land. The civilian photographed those marks before the captain had them painted over. He never said why he wanted the photos. The habit of private notes was one of the only things he shared with us, brief commands and a small hard look when something mattered. The creek's water felt colder than it should as we crossed it, the bed deeper and tighter than any stick or map said it would be. Tire tracks in mud appeared along a service path, though no vehicle should have been in the valley since the evacuation. They led to a clearing and then stopped in perfect silence at a patch of stone, as if the vehicle had rolled off the world like a coin over a cliff. The mine mouth itself kept the thickest taste of that smell, wet leaves mixed with hot metal, and the hum grew into something layered, a hiss that rose and fell like a radio left between stations. Inside the first few steps of the mine we found relics that did not belong to any recent past. Rusted brackets from old equipment, a strip of metal stenciled decades ago, and under grime the words scratched by hand. Phase 3 successful breach, a line that looked like it belonged to some older plan, not the present. The civilian placed a small device at the mine's edge and didn't tell us what it did. He stepped back and nodded like he'd been reassured or disappointed. I could not say which. Each day bled into the next with the same odd rhythm, measurements that didn't hold, radios that picked up a soft breathing in the static, shadows moving along the far ridge in steady lines, as if following hidden footpaths. At first we blamed animals, raccoons with hairless patches, a dead one with cloudy eyes and skin, so pale it looked wrong, but the movement was too deliberate, too regular. Things on the slope slid in quiet procession, choosing a route with the care of things that had been doing the same thing for a long, long time. Twice we woke to find rifles and helmets arranged neatly at an observation post, and no men beside them. The bedrolls were empty, but not disturbed. It looked like someone had placed the weaponry there and then vanished. The smell there thickened until it clung to sleeves. The captain wanted to pull back and insist the sealing be postponed, but the civilian called a message on a channel none of us knew, and whatever answer came down shut the captain up. Orders from higher up moved like iron. The civil servant's radio voice was flat and brief, and it left no room for argument. Continue, no delays. We were told to prepare for engineers in 72 hours, sealing the gorge with enough explosives to close the valley for generations. Every sign, every odd scrap of distance, every chalk map with notches lined up around the gorge seemed to point not out into the world, but inward, as if someone wanted the valley closed, not to protect the outside, but to keep what was inside from walking away. We found paths that looped back on themselves, footprints in dust layered over rusted rails that marched down to an abandoned boxcar and stopped as if the steps had never left. In the mine's mouth, the hiss on the radio grew into rhythmic pulses that the signals man said matched the steady inhaling and exhaling of a slow breath. Watches lost minutes in the night, and sometimes, standing at a ridge, I felt my pencil roll from the vibration of a long tremor through the rock, more than from clumsy hands. Once a collapse closed a path behind us, so that a squad became trapped in a shallow cave. When we reached them, they were alive, but their eyes had the flat focus of people who'd been half elsewhere, listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. They rose like men waking from a dream that went too deep into the dark. No injuries, no scratches, only a calm so thick it came off them like a skin. When the captain asked the civilian about searching for the 2 men who'd been left at the empty observation post, the civilian said the land was too unstable to look further. The captain's jaw clenched, and he walked off to stare into the valley. For a moment he looked like a man trying to carry two truths at once. The official one, and the one his bones kept. The engineers came in a convoy, strict and practical, carrying shape charges and drills, and the look of men who'd sealed mines, collapsed tunnels, and filled old mouths with stone many times over. They glanced at radios, and their faces went the color of someone who'd smelled something wrong but couldn't name it. We placed charges in choke points, where a controlled slide would close the narrow throat of the gorge. The crew worked fast, burying metal into rock, wiring detonations to a pattern that would fold the valley in on itself, like closing a book over some page you wanted unread. The hum in the air rose until it pressed at my chest with each slow pulse. The valley felt like an animal listening for the moment it would be contained. When the charges went, the valley moved the way it always had. It sighed. It rolled. It made a sound like 1,000 dry leaves set down at once. The blasts came in ordered thuds that rolled through the hollows, and when a massive slab fell into the gorge, it sounded like a door being slammed on a house. Dust rose so high the morning turned the color of old paper. The creek that had wound and cut through the valley was forced into a new path by the fallen stone. Its old bend swallowed like a breath that had been held for too long. When the dust settled, the gorge was a new thing, a wall of broken rock where open throat had been. The hum did not vanish so much as retreat, thinned like a song someone had finished humming. In the days after, the valley lay under a closed mouth, the new stone looking older than its neighbors, as if it had been waiting under the surface for a long time to be set right. The town felt different when we walked it afterward, not haunted in the cheap sense, but waiting, as if someone had put a hand over the face of a sleeping person and expected them never to wake. Faded curtains twitched in a wind that sounded thinner, and some doors that we'd seen nailed shut had been left open as if somebody planned to return. The families who'd refused relocation had paths cleared through the brush that led deeper into the hills, footprints that vanished into hollow at the edge of map. The valley, we were told later in rewritten reports, was sealed for public safety, an environmental emergency, the product of an unstable mine and shifting geology. Our private notebooks had different numbers, distances that flexed mysteriously, watches that lost time, radios that caught breath and reply in static, chalk maps with notches, placed where engineers had out to put charges and symbols that didn't belong to any language I knew. At the debrief, they took our maps and our gear and rewrote the story with clean lines and neat reasons. The civilian disappeared into an office without thanks, and the captain stood in the hall long after everyone else had left, his face older than when we'd first met. I tucked my own pages under my bunk and thought about going back not as a soldier, but as a man who wanted answers. Yet the memory of how the gorge breathed when the stone slid kept me from promising I would. The valley left a residue on us, the smell on our sleeves that felt like wet leaves over hot metal, a thin, sweet metallic trace that returned on damp nights, when the wind moved through the trees in slow, steady breaths. Sometimes, in years that followed, the faint vibration would crawl into me when weather turned cold and wet, a small reminder that Hell Gap had not been erased so much as hidden, and that whatever lay beneath the stone was patient enough to wait out fences and reports and the tidy sentences of official records. I am old now, and memory softens with age, but Hell Gap has kept its edges sharp in me like a scar. I still think of the two names that never came home, of rifles left standing like offerings and men who woke from the dark with eyes like glass. I think about those chalk circles and the notches that matched the paths where charges would later sit. Were they warnings? Were they maps? Were they pleas? I think of the people who stayed on their land because they trusted it more than they trusted anyone else, and of how the valley's map refused to be drawn by men in uniforms and black numbers. Why would the military seal off its own land? I have guesses, fear of something that would move if it knew the world was open, an ancient hold on a place that remembers itself the way a bone remembers a broken place, a thing that shaped the valley and wanted to be kept behind walls instead of let loose. None of those answers bring quiet. The best truth I can hold up is simpler, and worse. Hell Gap was sealed because it remembered, and some memories in the earth are patient and dangerous in ways we taught not to measure. If this story reached you, and you felt your skin prickle when the wind shifted outside, then you know what I mean. If you want more stories like this, quiet, old, and the kind that makes a shadow in the back of your mind, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the videos on your screen now to keep listening. If you watched all the way through, thank you, and be careful where you let your curiosity lead you, because not every place that wants to be forgotten is willing to let go.